welcome. I'm Rhiannon. Welcome to Rhiannon Reviews. Today I'm going to review An Yu's Braised Pork. Here it is. I was really excited to find this novel in the mainstream. Those of you that know me know that I have a background in things Chinese. This book is really interesting because it's by a Chinese lady, a young lady who's about 26, 27, called An Yu, and it is written in English for, I suspect, a Western market. It is not a book written in Chinese and translated, so that's the first thing to say about it. An Yu grew up in Beijing, and she seems to have had quite an international childhood with stints in New York and Paris overseas. She went to New York when she was, I think, 19 to study for a degree in creative writing at a New York university, which she graduated from. And she apparently spends her time now between Hong Kong and New York. The story is about a Beijing urbanite, a young woman called Wu Jiejie, and it begins when Jiejie finds the body of her husband dead in the bathtub. He had committed suicide, and instead of a suicide note, or by way of a suicide note, he left a picture of what is called a fishman, a drawing of a fish with the body of a man, and this sets up the motif and the quest for the whole of the novel. So Wu Jiejie is looking for the meaning of this enigmatic drawing. She knows that her husband had an encounter with a fishman on a trip to Beijing. So that essentially is the story arc. What is the meaning of this fishman? I have to say, I got off on the wrong foot with this novel. When I read in the first chapter about this fishman, the fish drawing with the body of the head, my initial reaction was, oh no, here we go again. Cannibalism, which is a theme in Chinese literature, contemporary, modern Chinese literature, shall we say. The most famous example is the Republican writer Liu Xun and his short story novella, The Diary of a Madman, and it's all about how Chinese society is cannibalistic in a sense that people feed upon themselves. I will, if you're interested in exploring the idea of food and cannibalism in Chinese literature, there is tons of stuff out there by people who were a lot cleverer than I am and are proper academics. So you can just Google it, or I'll put a few links in the comments box below. Anyway, that turned out to be a bit of a red herring. I also got preoccupied with this idea of, in Chinese, the word for fish is the same phonetic sound as the word for prosperity. So I got preoccupied with, was this idea of a fishman something to do with the mad rush to get rich in China and people being consumed by prosperity? Neither of these things, I think, was the case, and they both turned out to be red herrings. What it came to me as I read through the book was that actually the book had more in common with contemporary Japanese work defined by magical realism, that the book is full of magical realism. So, for example, it reminded me of the work of Haruki Murakami, and there are scenes in the bar where Jiejie is talking to a man who becomes her lover, Leo, which reminded me very much of the little novella Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So I got off on the wrong foot because I was looking, or with my training, I was trying to understand the book in the framework of sort of contemporary Chinese literature, and I am wondering actually if it's better understood and perhaps An Yu is more influenced by contemporary Japanese literature. This is a book that I came to appreciate much more in retrospect. It's a kind of modern art, a picture that when you stand back and look at the whole thing, you see more to it than when you're actually walking through it in a kind of linear fashion. The brushstrokes are very carefully placed, and one of its strengths is it's open to many interpretations. The way I understood it, and this is purely my interpretation, other people will have other ways, and I saw it very much as a novel born of alienation and deracination in contemporary China. I think people in the West fail to understand the degree of destruction of of traditional Chinese thought and ideas carried out post 1949 by the traditional communists, by the Communist Party. And what we have now is, in the urban settings, very quick development. The novel is defined by descriptions of an urban Beijing setting, quite sort of neutral. Apartment blocks, metros, shopping malls, supermarkets, metros, this sort of thing. And out of this kind of flat urban environment is this magical realism that bursts out. So, for example, we have a scene where Wu Jiejie is painting the Sakyamuni Buddha on the wall of an apartment. She's been commissioned to paint the Buddha on the internal wall of somebody's room. And she has a kind of metaphysical experience where she enters this world of water. And we get the idea of the Fishman and the world of water. And Wu Jiejie has various sort of quasi-metaphysical, magical realist experiences, spiritual experiences, depends on your interpretation, where she falls into a world of water. So I think she creates this idea of a totalitarian state, which is quite cleverly done. There's walls and restrictions, and you see examples of it. For example, her aunt's husband is arrested and subsequently released for corruption, but within it all is this kind of bursting out of magical realism, bursting out. You can interpret it how you want, metaphysical, spiritual, religious. You could see it as political. There are scenes in Tibet, for example, where the ground has been arid for years, and suddenly the tulips start popping out of the ground, fields and fields of tulips. So you could interpret that politically, in that the Han Chinese are a colonial oppressive regime in Tibet. So the novel is open to many, many interpretations. I was really, really desperate to be hooked into this book, and I really wanted to like it. Unfortunately, there were only a few occasions where I really felt that I was hooked. The first one was a description where Wu Jiejie is going shopping at Chinese New Year, and she goes into a glitzy department store, and she wants to buy 2 red for Chinese New Year cashmere jumpers as gifts for her boyfriend's parents for Chinese New Year. And they're very expensive, and since the death of her husband, she doesn't have the money. So she tries to haggle with the sales girl, which is what would have happened in old China. And the sales girl says, no, we're a modern department store. One doesn't haggle here. And in the end, Jiejie pays the exorbitant price that she can't afford, several weeks' rent, and she comes out of the shop and weeps. That really got to me, that scene. I really related to it during my time in China, seeing how China has developed. There was a New Year's meal with her boyfriend Leo's parents. Again, that hooked me. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I thought that was extremely well done, especially the issues around traditional attitudes to a widow. That was beautifully handled. And I was desperate for them to get to Tibet, to the sort of crux of the quest, and it took a long, long time to get there. And finally, when they got to the village in Tibet, and we started to get some unraveling of the puzzle, and then I was hooked. But then again, she lost me, and that was slightly problematic for me. The novel is not without problems. It's a fantastic novel for a debut. But the main problem to me was the character of Wu Jiejie. I could not empathise with her. I think paradoxically, Anu was trying to create a character who was alienated and deracinated, but I couldn't get an emotional hook on her. I couldn't feel her. So, for example, briefly, she seems to have a happy or satisfactory sexual relationship with Leo, but we don't really get her emotions about this. Similarly, when there's issues about the consequences of her being a widow and traditional attitudes to that hamper her, Wu Jiejie doesn't seem to react to that, to the injustice of it. So it's very difficult to empathise with her at all. The second problem for me was the structure of the book. Anu sets up this structure of a quest. So quite early on, we know that we're on a quest to find the meaning of the Fishman, which becomes the world of water. And we're doing this quest with Jiejie. And very early on, in the first chapter, I believe, we expect the resolution to be in Tibet. So we kind of want to get to Tibet. But she loses the thread of Tibet, and she meanders through Beijing for at least half the book. And you start to lose sense of purpose. I think she needed to get to the nitty-gritty much quicker. So that was problematic. The other issue, and I'm reluctant to criticise too much here, because I just have to say to Anu, hats off. If English is not her first language, and she has produced a debut novel of this calibre and standard in a language that is her second language, well, I'm full of awe for her. It's a fantastic achievement. However, I do think there were some points of misjudgment. So, for example, the bits I enjoyed most about the novel were the magical realist, the what you might call metaphysical, possibly religious scenes, if you're that way inclined. So there was a wonderful one in Beijing where Wu Jiejie is losing herself in the world of water. But then very quickly afterwards, it is ruined, to my mind, by being juxtaposed with a very, very crude sexual image. And it ruined the whole thing for me. So there were various issues to do with juxtaposition and pacing and minuscule use of language that I think perhaps were not as good as they could have been. It is a novel, Braised Pork is a novel that I have thought about a lot, and I have come to appreciate and enjoy much, much more in retrospect. As I said earlier, it's a carefully structured kind of modern art painting which is open to many interpretations, and that's its strength. Would I recommend it? Yes, if you are interested in contemporary Chinese society. I've done a Jerry Hunt there, but yes, if you're interested in contemporary Chinese society, certainly, or contemporary Chinese politics. If you enjoy magical realism, if you like contemporary Japanese magical realist type novels, I think you might enjoy this. If you're looking for a strong female romantic heroine so beloved of Western publishers, then I think not. You won't find something, I think, that you will relate to in this book. So as I said, it's open to many, many, many interpretations, and I would love to hear from you what you think. and I hope you enjoy it.